Yeah, this is I mean, we're so lucky in this era. There's so much good music out there.
Yes.
And it breaks my heart that it breaks my heart that that there's not like an easier way for people to be explorers.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to For the Record, a casual, mostly unedited conversation series presented by Grey Matter, where we talk to music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice. Today, on episode 34, I spoke with Tristra Newyear Yeager, an experienced writer and the chief strategy officer at the music PR org Rock, Paper, Scissors. Tristra has 2 decades of experience working across a broad range of industries, as well as a doctorate that dealt with the history of the performing art in Siberia and Mongolia. She's passionate about cross-cultural stories, sounds from all over, and insights into tech, science, and society. And our conversation covered the full gamut. Hope you enjoy. Hey Tristan, it's great to have you here.
Oh, it's awesome to get a chance to speak with you.
Absolutely. Um, I've read a bunch of your writing in the past, and as I think I told you, I love the way your mind works. Um, and was grateful that Martin recommended that we chat. Uh, so yeah, to begin, as we always begin here, just would love to hear more of your story, your origins, where you're from, and when your relationship with music started.
Yeah, I was born, as I mentioned before we started recording, I was born in the US state of Texas, in the Republic of Austin, as many people call it. But my family swiftly moved further east, and so I grew up in a very small town that was quite monocultural at the time, called Lee's Summit, Missouri.
Mm,
But it was an interesting place to grow up in that my father was an Episcopal minister. So I heard a lot of very classical music regularly in church. I, lived down the street, believe it or not, from Pat Metheny's family. So Pat
wow,
Metheny, the
cool.
jazz guitarist. Yeah. So as a young kid, I got this weird, tiny little glimpse of a completely other musical world, and his mom was this wonderful woman who was also quite artistic. She was a visual artist and like a craftsperson, and she invited, she's very friendly with the kids in the neighborhood, like a super sweet kind of like grandma to us all.
Hmm.
And I remember her inviting me in once to her studio, and in her studio she had one of Pat's Grammys, so I get to hold a Grammy
Cool.
as in grade school. And I was and so in some ways though it was great because I lived in such a world where no one else was like that, and so it
Mhm.
was kind of amazing to have that little like flash of there's music can take you to other places. But I later on, my family moved to the St. Louis area. My first job was as a record store clerk, and I was already deeply obsessed with music, recorded music, stuff I heard on the radio. I mean, I would save up my money to buy little 45s because I'm a Gen Xer, so
Mm.
that's where I was at the time. Didn't have many singles. I didn't like singles. They didn't sound very good. But I as a record store gal, I got introduced to a ton more music. So all sorts of things like I remember one of the clerks who's a bit older. I was like 15. So I was always kind of people took some perverse pleasure in introducing me to stuff like Ice Cube or
Mm, 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 mm.
to Can. Like I remember
Mm.
hearing "You Do Right" in the record store, and this college kid being like, "Check this out," so, so for me, music was always just so important to my identity and to this sort of psychological world that I built for myself. I was an unusual young person, and while I did have some friends who were also a bit outside of the mainstream of the school, I was somewhat solitary in my habits, and in a lot of pain, to be honest. And I was the victim of a lot of bullying, which at the
Mm.
time in the US wasn't addressed very directly. And it was really difficult. So music for me became this kind of sanctuary. So I got really into the 4AD catalog, which was
Mhm.
only import at the time. So that was a big, I guess that kind of made it even more magical that I had to really earn it. I had to find all these records, which I had a lot of LPs at the time and some CDs. And I would, be in my room and I would sing along with Elizabeth Fraser or Lisa Gerrard, and sometimes folks like Billie Holiday and all sorts of other
Mm.
people. And just through singing with music, not only did I teach myself how to sing, but I also managed to sort of deal with my emotional turmoil in a way that was very idiosyncratic, but seemed to have kept me somewhat stable and from totally going off the deep end or getting into other self-medication kind of approaches that might not have been so constructive. Yeah, so that's was like my youth with music. I didn't really in college, I joined bands, I started performing, I did all sorts of crazy, weird art projects like improvised vocals along with a contemporary dancer friend of mine. I ran into a really wonderful woman who had fled Sarajevo and come to the college where I went to school and was studying ethnomusicology, and she became my first like official vocal teacher. So
Cool.
for a while I was in a Bosnian band. we
Cool.
did Yeah, we did all sorts of pop music, from the region, and then really, really traditional folk, which in Bosnia is often referred to, and I think in the former Yugoslavia in general is referred to as izvorna. So there's like folk music, and then there's like real roots music, and this was like
Mm.
the super traditional, like three women singing together with like a really solid drone part, and then these really complicated, highly ornamented, like lots of glottal stops, lots of just really interesting um, harmonies. And I got really, really into that music. And then eventually I wound up in Moscow, Russia, and I studied there's like a little music, well, it's not little, there's a conservatory there, a music school called Nyesinka, and I studied folklore there with a teacher from Archangel and learned
Cool.
a bunch of the different Russian styles as well. And so, um, yeah, but at the same time, I was doing like improv music and all sorts of other really funny, random, more experimental stuff. And eventually got, please stop me if you need to, how to keep on going.
This is
I'll just keep
amazing.
on going through the ages here.
Please do.
So and eventually wound up back in the US um, in New York City, where there are lots of great bands. And so I was in like a soul slash ska slash R&B band. I was called Brave New Girl, and I'm still friends with the folks from there, and they're still making music, really great music. I was doing some more like Russian and Ukrainian traditional slash experimental stuff, including at like an off Broadway theater where I got to perform with people like, if you've heard of the guy from Gogol Bordello, Eugene
Mhm.
Hutz. That was interesting.
Mm.
And at the time, I got a job working at a concert presenter that was doing a lot of international music in New York called World Music Institute. They're still operating. They were really groundbreaking in their day in that they had a concert series that was just purely music from non English speaking, it was what was called world music at the time, right? So it was like
Right.
Indian classical, Persian classical, it could be West African music, sometimes they'd even do gospel or Cajun music, all sorts of roots music and traditional classical music from all over the world. And it was a super interesting place to work because all sorts of people would just like come in from, they were either friends of the organization or musicians from abroad, and some of them would come in and like you'd have we had a kora player who would come in and sing songs about everybody in the office. Um, I don't know what he was singing. He swore it was complimentary, or someone would come in and drum or do something else. So it was a super interesting environment
Mm,
for a young person being like in my 20s. But after a while, I decided I wanted to go back to complete, continue my education, and I moved to Indiana because I decided, for whatever reason, I really wanted to study Mongolian and sort of non-Russian ethnic minorities in Russia.
mm,
And, that's what I did. I thought at first I wanted to get more into the musical side of things, but I wound up doing a dissertation on theater just because the sources that were available in the time periods that interested me were pretty limited when it came to music. Pre-recorded music era, it was really difficult to find many resources that were very helpful. So I did stuff about theater because there were tons of great primary and secondary sources on theater, which involved a lot of music. Anyway, as I was finishing my dissertation, I saw a funny ad in the newspaper, that crazy quaint way of finding jobs back in the
mm,
day,
mm, mhm.
and it was for a world music publicist. And so I'm like, I know what world music is, but I don't know what a publicist is, but who cares? So I'm just gonna apply. And that's how I met my current boss, who's become a friend over the years, Dmitry Vitsa, who is the founder and CEO of Rock Paper Scissors, where I am now the chief strategy officer.
Mhm.
But at the time, we were representing artists and doing tour promotion, and tour PR, album PR, all sorts of other things like for festivals. We worked with a bunch of festivals like Global Fest in the US and some other performing arts center type things. And but as over the years, we've transitioned more and more into music technology and innovation. So I've gotten a chance to learn a ton about how the industry works. And but the cool thing is like the basis that I got to form thanks to all this work with artists, especially artists from very different backgrounds to mine, let me really help me hone my skills and get into interviewing people, learning how to be curious in ways that could be really constructive, and yeah, learning a ton about music, which is remains an obsession.
Yeah, great. Um, yeah, no, firstly, thank you for sharing all of that, and I'm glad after
A lot.
y
Sorry.
no, no, it was amazing. I'm glad, after you've spent so much time with music that you continue to be obsessed with music, even, after being exposed to the industry for so long.
Even the industry can't kill my love. Yes.
Yeah, which is amazing, and I appreciate that. Um, yeah, I also wanted to point out, in hearing your background, there were, like, many moments of overlap. I think I'm from a small town in Minnesota,
Oh,
uh,
where? Which one?
uh, Brownsdale. It's, like,
Where's that?
it's about 2 hours straight south of Twin Cities. It's a town of 600 people. It's, like, very small.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we go up to, Grand Marais and
Mm.
environs every year, so, I know a little bit about parts of Minnesota, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, born and raised, and, uh my grandfather was a Presbyterian minister, actually, so we got
yeah,
that in
priest
common.
kids.
Priest
Yeah.
indeed. I grew up not being able to speak very well, had a stutter, and was,
Mhm.
like, also bullied and kind of isolated, and then, like, took to singing as a means of kind of escaping that and honing, this other way to express myself. So anyways, some
That's
overlap
so cool.
in our
So
stories
music
that I
saved
wanted
you
to point.
too, yeah.
Indeed, indeed. And, despite being exposed to the industry, I'm also still obsessed.
Well, there's nothing to compare to that magical feeling that is both like a complete overtaking of the mind and of your body, right? Like
Mm,
there's a lot of experiences that are embodied that can feel like this huge rush, and then there are intellectual experiences, but music does both.
yeah.
And that to me is always why it was so powerful and why it could allow me to sort of create this sanctuary for myself. And it still does that today. Like, hard times that I've been through, music has still proven extremely effective in maintaining whatever shreds of sanity I can,
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Indeed, music just has a really, unique ability to kinda break through our outer shells and,
mhm.
kinda hit us straight away. Um, yeah, I often think back to this interview I did once with this composer Elliot Sharp,
Mhm.
like experimental guitarist, who's based in New York, and he talked about like this idea of like pheromonal resonance and how like music when we're like in a
Mm.
shared space and like is bringing people, kind of uniting them, and there's like a biological component of us all
Totally.
being in the same room and connecting us that is really unique to music, and music, kind of music alone can facilitate. So um
Yeah, it's amazing how, it can I mean, I think it quite literally gets our brainwaves synced up, the way stories do too. I mean, stories can have a similar effect,
right.
um, but it can synchronize our minds in interesting ways, but yeah, it is so incredible. And every once in a while, in fact, it's to the point where it's just like if I'm not being deeply moved by music, I'm kind of like annoyed. I'm like, oh, I can't, I gotta find something that makes me feel
Yeah,
something.
move
It's a little
me.
bit, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it doesn't take long, and this is like this. I mean, I often joke that it was good I wasn't young with something like Spotify, because I think I would have just never come out of my room, and I would have just been listening to music constantly. But we had to work for it a little bit more back in my day. And in some ways, it did make you listen to things more thoroughly,
Yeah.
right? Like you jump around a lot more. You can be like, oh, who is this? Or yeah, I think I'll listen to whatever this new album by some big pop star. Whereas like before, you'd be like, I don't have the time for that. I don't have the
Right.
money.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting, but yeah.
What are some of the, when you think back, like when you were working at a record store, like what are some of the albums, what are some of the artists, that came to mind as like, that did hit you really deep?
Well, I think I already mentioned Can. I think that was from what
Right.
you do writes on Monster Movie, I believe. And I got really into them as a teenager, which I think is kind of unusual for a gal teenager to be like listening to krautrock,
Hmm.
but maybe it's not anymore. I don't know. It was back then. Like I think it was like the only person I knew who liked them. Um, but I really loved the kind of it was that sort of mix of looseness and structure, and that you could have something that really grooved but felt like it was just about to spin off into like some kind of total chaotic mess.
Mhm.
Another band that was really, really important to me that had some similar qualities was the last 2 albums by Talk Talk
Mm.
were huge, like, watersheds for me as a listener. Um, just what is it? Spirit of Eden and Laughing Stock are just so full of weird and mysterious noises. Like, there's a song structure, it's, like, big and kinda sprawling, and it kinda bops around, and it's very beautiful. It has a lot of things in common with, like, certain movements in jazz, but, like, there's also very much, like, a pop song structure, and then there's just lots of weird my mom would jokingly call them play, because she's like, "What are they doing?" There'd be all these weird little noodles, and, like, someone dropped a drum brush, so, like, just dropped one, and it's like you hear it, and, like, maybe someone leaned on the piano, or who knows? Who knows what's going on? But it has this, like, atmospheric quality that is really evocative and, like, just very eerie. Like, you feel like you're hearing some transmission from another world or
Mm.
from other intelligences. Like, I don't mean aliens, but I mean, like, a plant is playing music for you,
Right.
right? Like, there's
Right.
there's something really interesting going on in those albums, and they're also just really, earnest. Like, a couple of the songs are about, I believe, Tim Freeze-Green coming to terms with a relationship with someone who was like a serious heroin addict, right? And like, there's some deep stuff there but it's not literally, it's not literal storytelling. It's very emotional, sort of um, figurative
Mhm.
storytelling. So that was a big album. And then I mean, I would buy everything that I could from Dead Can Dance and the Cocteau Twins, which kind of
Mm.
pretty much pegs me. But I really loved, again, this kind of atmosphere, which was so different from my everyday life, that really felt like it came from somewhere else. And I could imagine all sorts of things. So, then my biggest I mean, I think the first album I got really, truly, deeply obsessed with as a teenager was, the Sisters of Mercy's Floodland. It's just kind of I'm both embarrassed and excited to share that. Um, and I was yeah, I like to joke that I'm a recovering goth. I didn't do the full makeup thing because I have freckles, like, goths with freckles really struggle, like, you
Mm.
can't it just doesn't look right. It's just you have to have so much makeup that but I did wear all black. In fact, my parents put a moratorium on black clothing purchases for a
Mm.
year or so. Um, but it was I was yeah, I'd wear all black. I'd listen to the Sisters of Mercy and Dead Can Dance, and I was basically that girl for the Gen Xers out there. Yeah.
Cool. Um, oh, yeah, I love that. I recently, yeah, just had like a Cocteau Twins moment, where I realized I like knew the Cocteau Twins like relatively well. Had listened to a couple
Uh-huh.
of their albums, relatively extensively, but just like everything I loved, I never really thought about like them collectively, holistically, over the
Mhm.
course of like their whole canon, and took some time to go through and listen through their canon in chronological order, and it's so good. I had such a good time just
Yeah.
listening through the entire thing.
And some of their stuff with, like, Harold Budd and, like, they
Yes,
they had some really
that
interesting
album.
collaborations.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a
man.
beautiful album.
I
It's very
love that
springy. It's
record.
a good time of year in the Northern Hemisphere to listen to that album
Indeed.
and to Talk Talk. It's a very I always associate Talk Talk with spring for some
Mm.
reason, so
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. Um, cool. So I'm curious generally how, just, like, hearing the way, that you're talking about music, and is very evocative, and it makes sense that you were drawn to ethnomusicology, feels like. And I'm curious how, like, how that background, um, has influenced your work as a publicist.
Oh, that's a great question. Because, first of all, I think ethnomusicology at its best can really help you see how to understand artistry in a cultural context that is unfamiliar to you,
Mm,
and to seek out how to talk about someone's work who is using really different parameters or foundations or cultural lineages that aren't your own. Um, so, and that can really, bizarrely, be really helpful in talking to someone who has in the more business context, right? Because they're also human, and most people want to hear human stories. They don't want to hear like your business jargon and maybe the kind of stuff that gets like an investor excited. It's not really going to get a journalist excited.
right.
So you want to think about like what the human story is, and even um, pretty corporate things can have that. Like bigger organizations, this gets a little more challenging, but one of my favorite I mean, I love all our clients, of course, I have to say that, but, I do really enjoy working with people in, like, the startup or the scale-up phase, so you're kind of still trying to experiment with different narratives, when they're trying to find their way and how they wanna sort of present themselves to the world, that stuff is really interesting to me, um but like, basically having an ethnographic point of view is really great in technology. So I have some friends who are ethnographers who now do stuff with like user experience for places like, a home improvement store, a national home improvement chain here in the US. So there's there's a lot of interesting ways you can use an ethnographic point of view to improve your writing, storytelling, communication, um, interaction with other humans. And yeah, I think it's kind of an overlooked. I mean, there's definitely people who apply ethnography in very specific design fields, but I feel like the music industry, I don't hear that talked about as much. And that's a really that's unfortunate because we're talking about things like super fans,
Mm,
right? So if we want to talk about super fans, we have to talk about who they are, why they do the things they do, and that's like a cultural phenomenon of sorts. So,
mm,
and there's like the diversity of super fans, right? We can't just I think there's sort of like this, just like people say community, like build community. Like, what is that? Like, community is
Yeah.
a group of people, so it's like going to be very specific. And that the ethnographic point of view can help you ask those questions. And when you start asking them beyond the just like that kind of snarky way I just asked those questions, you can really start finding some interesting stuff and understanding more of how music impacts people or how people interact with music or what music does in our cultures. That to me is really fascinating.
Yeah,
And when you're excited about something, it's easier to pitch it to someone else.
totally.
I find. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that. You can kind of create the connective tissue, between people by kind of leaning into the empathy of like, what is the human story here? What is really connecting us to this thing?
Yeah, it's all we got because, like, all this bullshit doesn't make anyone happy, it makes us all unhappy. Like, let's all just be humans together as much as we can, and that's
Yeah.
not always fun. Humans can be real jerks. So
True.
we have to bear that in mind, and there's tensions between us, friction, disagreement, but all of that is really, really important to allow its appropriate space, right? So disagreement and friction can make us feel really alive together as
Mm,
long as it doesn't spill over into abuse, threats, like there's truly pathological or, destructive sides of human social activity. But
indeed.
um yeah, yeah. I mean, you run a Discord, so you you know, right? You felt this, um, but the human stories can help us kind of work with those tensions and not and kind of channel them in ways that maybe are more constructive.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, you can kind of dig into the tension a little bit without, verging into the pathological conflict. And, remember that can, there is energy in tension, but we don't have to, we can
Yeah,
use that to grow in the same direction.
you got to have that dissonance. This is what I always loved about music from the Balkans is dissonance is like big part of the structure. You have to
Mm,
have those minor thirds or major seconds are really popular in folk songs, and they're just like when you sing them together, I mean, you know what it's like as a vocalist when you sing those really close harmonies, the beats, and like listen, especially if you sing them outside, like the environment will just come alive with these bouncing frequencies.
yeah.
And a lot of the ornaments and things make a lot of sense if you're in the right topography. Like if there's a cliff not far from you
Mm,
and you do a glottal stop, you'll hear this like pop up, like you'll hear this beat of your
mm,
voice bouncing off the rock wall or something that's a certain distance away. And you're like, oh, that's why they got into that. Because they're like, a lot of people were developing these songs in the mountains, right? They were singing from one place to another. Um, and so you can definitely hear when you sing something in the right environment, you like the tension all makes sense, right?
huh. Yeah. Cool. Cool. I hadn't thought about that. Like the actual topography, of the earth actually playing a role in, some of the techniques and, even chordal structure of the
Yeah.
music itself. That's cool. Yeah, I guess it's also just like, I remember like first having the realization when I was studying music in school of like, when I was studying, like atonal music and,
Hmm.
and trying to figure out why anybody was listening to
It's like you have
atonal.
to you think about that music, right? You don't really listen to it, but like, oh,
Yeah,
this is great. I love
yeah,
this.
it's like conceptual music, and that's the point. Um, you kn it's like when John Cage would, like, play plants, and that would be like a composition. These conceptual
Yeah.
elements are supposed to make us think, but then also, like, in, exploring the stuff that wasn't, like, purely atonal,
Hmm.
but borrowed elements, and suddenly those moments of tonality, of consonance that would happen occasionally within the dissonance all of a sudden were transcendent. It's like this
Hmm.
like moment where we've broken through. I guess, that's kind of a metaphor here as
I
well.
love it. No, that's really beautiful, and it's true when the order shines through in some of those pieces. You're like, Oh, like you really appreciate the order more than if you had just heard, a more straight up concerto that did
Right.
all the things that we expect.
Yeah.
Um, and there's all the conceptual stuff's really interesting. It is, I have to say, it took me a really long time to get into more intellectual music. I was always just like, because I just always wanted that emotional hit that I
Yeah.
cultivated. Um, but it's really great. It's cool over the years how your taste can expand, and um I love also being at a point in life where you're like, this is good, but I don't like it.
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
Um it's important to, I feel sometimes like everyone I talk to who's a little younger is still struggling like with, I know it sounds a little bit condescending, so forgive me friends, but it's um that there's stuff that's like objectively well crafted music, or that I really appreciate. I can tell the musicians are incredibly skilled, but man, I don't ever need to hear it again.
Mm.
You know?
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just like, n understanding your own taste and, like,
Yeah.
letting
Yeah.
that shine through. I guess we as artists, we as, performers, should make space for that and not expect every single person, even if we're virtuosos, in our craft,
Mhm.
not expect everyone to just, be emotionally moved by our work. There's a difference there.
Yeah, it's realizing that people cannot like your very exquisite thing, not just
Mhm.
because you don't think it's exquisite. I mean, you know that it's good, right? Like
Right.
if you've put in the time and the effort, you know when something is good
Mhm.
and when you're doing it really well. But most people don't care about whether it's good or not. Just like, do they like it or not? And they're not
Yeah,
even thinking about it too much, and that's fine. That's fine. Um,
totally.
that's why you really appreciate when someone really clicks with something. For me, it's with my fiction, which is quite complicated. It has a lot of layers to it, a lot of stuff going on, and not everyone digs it. That's fine. It's something though, but you got to go through that. You have to go over that threshold
Yeah.
of the pain of criticism, and you have to go over it kinda quasi regularly as an artist. I kind
Sucks.
of feel like it does, it's really
Yeah.
heart-wrenching, and it's
Mhm.
it's so irrational, like, you're looking at yourself going like, "Why do I care? Like, I don't care about
Mhm.
this idiot. This person's stupid," whatever, you're talking to yourself, and then you realize that, like, they hit at some, you know, injured, sad part of you
Yeah.
that desperately wants people to at least get it, like, even if they don't like it, like, just get it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's that's why we gotta stick together
Indeed. Indeed. That's
when we're
exactly
in
why.
the when we're in those dark, dark, dark passages. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stick with the others who know that pain too well.
Yeah.
Um, cool, cool. I'm glad you brought that up because I did wanna create a little space for that before we dive into part 2 of this conversation. We'll talk
Mhm,
more, like, about what you're listening to, but, um, you as a writer outside of, music publicist and,
mhm,
I believe you've written a few novels, and I would
mhm.
just, yeah, love if you could talk a little bit about those.
Wow, okay. I well, see, this is like the novels are a way to unite some of the stuff that music does to me. So
Mm,
this is kind of funny. I write my fiction often while listening to music. Like I'll be, what I say write, it's in scare quotes. Um, I will be, say, walking down a country road because I live out in the middle of nowhere, at dawn is breaking, and I'm listening to a song or some musical piece, and I'll just see something, like I'll see a scene, and that is usually how I write my books. So
mm,
it's like I take all these weird little scenes and I start working with them and I write them down and I start stringing them together. And of course, a plot line has to emerge and characters will emerge. But if I ever need to get back to like the emotional oomph of a moment, I can just put that song back on again and I'll be
mm,
there again. And sometimes the stuff is like not, it doesn't come out neat and pretty and like, oh, this is like very, normal narrative arc. Like there's a lot of weird stuff that comes out. So my latest project is a series of novels about the utopian community of New Harmony, Indiana, which is an actual place. Was really it was so world famous at the time that even Lord Byron trolled it in one of the contests of Don Juan. Um, like Mary Shelley like knew about it. Like everybody knew about it. Um, but there were all these kinda oddballs that convened in this, like, what at the time was the frontier of the Western US, and, they were kinda living in this strange community together. There was they were really into music, actually. There's a lot of dancing, a lot of music, um, and, yeah, so I was really interested in this history, but I didn't wanna write, like, a bodice ripper, like, Bridgerton type, like,
Mm.
you know, "My gum, we're gonna have a utopia," like, I don't know, Bridgerton, but with socialists, I don't know. So I tried to combine, my fascination with, like, speculative stuff about tech, and so there's a future section and a past section. So, um but, like, music is kind of both in the story and like, formed the story. I Most of my big breakthroughs in terms of plot all come while just being deeply moved by music, and I'll just literally see like, this sounds crazy, it's like having an inner hallucination or, like, watching a
Mm.
movie in your head. I think a lot of people have these experiences with music, like, deeply visual ones, and then I go and I just write it down and go from there, so
Cool. Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing. I love that idea of, being able to tap into the emotional resonance of a moment, of a plot line by going back to the song. That's cool. That's powerful.
it's helpful because
That's
you don't
helpful.
forget. Like, you're like, "I had this great idea, like, 5 miles ago, and I can't fucking remember it
Yeah, like,
now."
oh yeah, that's what it was. Cool.
Yeah. They go grocery shopping. Yeah, of course. No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone goes grocery shop I have yet to write a grocery shopping scene. Maybe I should.
Yeah. Well, there's that, yeah, the grocery shopping scene that comes to mind is um, Don DeLillo, White Noise, kinda grocery scene of just like
Post the Pomo enemy grocery
yeah,
shopping. Love it.
yeah. Yeah, I still think about that when I go into grocery stores. It's just this is a strange
Yeah,
place.
it
Kind of
is. It
canned
is a weird
music,
place.
fluorescent lights, all of this food somehow packaged and ended up on these shelves here. I don't
Yeah. It is weird when you think about it, like, where did all these nuts, where did they all come from? How
yeah.
did they get harvested? How did the nut trees get pollinated? Like, you just think about I don't know, rabbit holes.
Yeah, yeah, anyway, we could go down that rabbit hole, but we'll pause there. Uh, um, and now yeah, would love to transition into part 2 of the conversation where I ask you some questions about the music that you listen to. And yeah, I mean, in the background, part of this series in For the Record is we're documenting, each of the music mentions that comes up, in conversation as a means of kind of creating connective tissue between the guests that come on and kind of creating this, archival mechanism that can be used for discovery and visibility into
I
these,
love it.
relationships between listeners and artists and all the other things that come up in conversation. Um, so the first question, I'm curious how you typically discover music, and if you could kind of frame that, within maybe some of your favorite curators or outlets or platforms that you
Mm.
may use.
I, well, it's a real random mix of things. So I have a little bit of a crazy life.
Mm.
I have 2 children, 10 and 14, work full time. I have this ridiculous hobby, and and I live out in the country, and we have, like, a whole menagerie. So there's a lot of, uh, let's say self-care isn't on the menu, it's care of all the other things, but,
Yeah.
so music it's often really random. So everything from, I'm part of the water and music community, so sometimes I'll just like go and look on the Discord and see what other people are listening to, and I've subscribed to some playlists of people from that community. Everyone, I obviously am in PR, so I'm reading a lot of media. I'll read an interesting article about, especially I'm interested in emerging and independent artists. Like I really try, something I've been trying to do this year is to support other independent creators by buying as direct from them as I possibly can. So one gal I discovered that way was the amazing Nyla Hunter.
Mm,
She's a harp player, composer, singer, and she has a really beautiful album that came out earlier this year called Love Gaze, all one word. That is just like totally, it's like got like moments of Cocteau Twins, Kate Bush,
mm.
but this kind of otherworldly, earthy, eerie magic, but not twee. She's
Cool.
got a beautiful sort of alto contralto voice that's got a lot of I mean she uses it really, really well, but it's not like overly cultivated as a voice, and her lyrics are really strange in a good way.
Cool.
um yeah, and so stuff like that. And what else do so Bandcamp is a big part of my discovery stuff. I try to follow and buy as much as I can afford. And I like a lot of electronic music. I listen to some like country, Americana, folk, I basically listen to everything.
Mm,
Everything that isn't like completely, there's a lot of pop music that I just don't relate to anymore because I'm like not all, wound up about romantic issues or like
mm.
I really don't care how much money someone has. But like last year I was really into Little Yachty's what is it? Let's Start Here. Um his sort of psychedelic album.
Cool.
And there's a couple really there's one track called We Saw the Sun that's just like so awesome.
Hmm.
Um and it ends with this extended sample of Bob Ross painting.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so I really like stuff like that that is just like a little bit non-standard, that has a groove, that has some kind of drive and energy, but that is got some looseness to it, some weird meandering. Maybe it's a bridge that just goes off the rails. But stuff that's super lockstep, like, I think Taylor Swift, for example, is a great example of someone who can write just a song you could bounce a dime off of, as you
Mhm.
say, but like, and sometimes it pushes the buttons, like you're just like, dang, this song's making me feel things. This is so annoying. Like, but it also there's no room in it. It's like this airtight, completely like well-oiled machine.
Mm,
Um, and I like things that are a little bit like there's some, you know, baling wire and like maybe someone stuck a piece of gum there so this part works, and
mm,
here's some weird stuff that's like the bass is a little bit too gloopy, or like there's some strange trebly things. Like there's this guy, Tobacco is one of his monikers, but he makes this music that's like both really glittery and shiny and kind of hyper poppy, but it's also just like deep and sludgy and like nasty in this way that I really enjoy that contrast,
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, anyway. Oh man, I could talk about music all day. Is there anything more specific that I should be focusing on? I don't know.
Uh, no, no, that was great, and I loved gloopy bass brought some good yeah, some good
Oh,
visuals
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah, you need that bass that feels like it's magmic. You just sort of like swelling up from underneath somewhere,
Yeah, I love
even
that.
in your earbuds.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we're so lucky in this era. There's so much good music out there.
yeah, true.
And it breaks my heart that more that there's not like an easier way for people to be explorers. Like it feels like, I on one hand, yeah, the algo can do some great stuff, and I've had stuff tossed at me where I'm like, "What the heck is that? That's awesome. Oh my god." You know? Um, or where I saw somebody else had listened to something and I was like, "What is that? Like that's such a weird title. I have to listen to that." Um, but I feel like it's really tough to um get really good recommendations, and you just kind of have to, it's a little bit of trial and error. Maybe that's always it's always going to be in this era of overabundance, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, that resonates. There is all of this music out there, and there are all these people that, yeah, it's just, how do we connect those threads between, the people who are making this music and the people who
Mhm.
would find resonance in that music if only it could find its way to them.
I
Yeah,
wish we had I mean, part of me wants to do, like, a whole independent artists and artists writ large, not just, like, musical artists, but, like, we all should be, and maybe this is something people are already doing, so, like and maybe I'm just out of touch because I, live in a small town in the Midwest and, like, that to have long conversations with my dog, but, um, I feel like we really need to make it, like, a cultural thing where we're gonna go direct to the artist as you can, like, if you can walk up to, where they happen to be, and so they don't have to, like, lift a finger, and you can plop some cash, cold hard cash in their palm in return for their music, like, that's the ideal. But,
totally.
if not, then Bandcamp or right from their website if they have a website where they do direct sales or at a show. Like, we can't all go to every show. We can't, necessarily not every artist wants to maintain a Shopify page. I totally get it. But like even Bandcamp is better than, if you and then still stream people. Like go get those micro pennies. Like let's give them a bigger share of that, bizarre pie. Like we should all be, like we can each champion folks and like look for the folks that only have, a few followers but have amazing music and just
Mhm.
start buying the crap out of their stuff and
Yeah.
playing it. If you don't have money, just sharing it as much as you can and just letting everyone know because it's like the fate is in our hands, right? Like we can do this.
Yeah.
We are the super fans. So, um, and in some ways, I feel like we don't like folks feel very not passive, but like isolated. I don't know. I like there isn't this cultural norm of being like, I am going to champion this music until you tell me to stop, kind of
Mm,
thing, my friend. I don't
right.
know. What maybe how do you feel about that, Keegan? Like you probably see a lot more of this than I do.
Yeah, I've I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. Like, I think that there is this opportunity, like the internet is this, like, connective technology in
Mhm.
which, like,
Totally.
the way that we're connected, with a local community in our physical reality can exist around anything interest-based, on the internet.
Mhm.
Like, suddenly that can become a local space for us. If only, the mechanisms through which we actually connect on the internet were not kind of co-opted into this, platform capitalist,
Ad-based model. I
ad-based
I I
model.
swear I have such a thing against ad-based stuff. Anyway, that's a whole other
Yeah,
rant, but
that's I think that's one of the things preventing us from actually, creating this reality. I think there's like, a growing appetite for people to, go direct to fan. There are more
mhm,
independent artists than ever. I think there's, growing awareness, like clearly, throughout like the artist community that like the streaming model doesn't work for most
mhm.
people. And I think that's kind of working its way into those artists' communities, and the people that, support them as well, that kind of awareness. So I think,
Yeah, it's so great. I feel that
important.
same energy, and I can say for other like for books, for example, that the margin is just so much better. So just talking
Mm,
like a business person for a sec, you know, I made from selling direct, I could make 5 times what I made in a month, what I made in like my previous lifetime as an author.
wow.
Because Amazon is sorry, Amazon, but you suck. And the way they treat um, creatives and authors is just, I mean, you're a supplier. Like just like the person that, makes like light up fish keychains and drop ships them, right? It's like you're on the same level as like plastic garbage. So um you are. It's like all the
Yeah.
same thing to them. They just like, what does a customer feel? It's like they don't care. And that's
Mhm.
maybe that's not their job. Like it's, that's fine. But like going direct, you're just if you do the math, it is such a better deal for you. And even if you only sell like 20 CDs, you will probably make so much more money and you'll feel
Totally.
more empowered, and you'll know people, you'll have their information, you'll have like folks support you. They've chosen you, you know? And that is so meaningful to
Mm,
be like I'd rather have 100 people who chose me and who care for my work best than 10,000 people who kind of like put me on a playlist and that was fine, you know?
totally.
But that's me. I mean, everyone's going to make their own decision. I would never tell an artist what to do unless they wanted me to tell them what to do and they thought that was fun. But I find it more rewarding to be the sort of captain of my own destiny a little bit more and to build relationships. But, you know, everyone's got a different path to take. My work has just led me to such amazing people, and that's been this unexpected reward for putting myself out there.
Mm,
That's maybe the flip side of like the one-star reviews or the jerk faces or the like shitty commenters, that we all face as
right.
creators. But the flip side is like I've made a bunch of friends and they're really people I would never have met. And some of them are
Mm,
like, 85-year-old historians, and some of them are, you know, like millennial filmmakers that are just like totally full of energy and like want to do crazy stuff. Like it's just so great. Like
mm.
this makes life like really worth living. Anyway,
Yeah.
kumbaya kind of
Yeah,
moment here. So
yeah, totally, oh, totally, I love it, I love it, it's all resonating, I mean, it's like, the more conversations we can have like this and amplify these conversations, like, Amazon does suck, and, like, we should
I
like
mean, sorry. Lots
like
of nice people work there. Really
yeah,
nice people work at
totally,
Amazon.
totally,
Yeah,
totally,
they
don't
don't
hate
mean
the
any
player,
harm.
hate the game,
Exactly.
it's just like, like, the models of scale that, like, don't create relationship, just, like, I think people are realizing they don't really work, and, like, the Jeff Bezos, classic business line of like,
Mhm.
your margins, are my opportunity is just like, a really horrible way to live. I think it's kind of
I
like,
think so too.
undercut everybody and like
Mm.
treat everyone, in your words, like plastic garbage while he goes and makes, has like $200 billion or however
Well,
much.
what's he even gonna do with that money? Like, you can't at that point, you're just it's just all chit. It's all just, like, points in some weird fake alpha male game that you've made
Yeah.
up for yourself. It's just like, that's
Yeah.
not the meaning of life, honestly. Well, maybe it is for someone who gets so deep into that game. I don't know. It seems to me so pointless and fruitless and, um, you
Evil,
know
sort of like, I mean,
yeah, yeah, I don't think any of us could withstand I think about this a lot, like if I were Elon Musk, which is kind of a weird thought, but like, I don't think I would be able to withstand all the yes men, all the like butt kissing, and oh, you're so smart. Oh, like here's all this money. Like, you'd lose your mind. You'd totally lose touch with, and that's why he's. It's not surprising he's totally gone off the deep end.
yeah,
Um, I would not. I think that's like a fate none of us could withstand. Even the most saintly person would struggle to ever
get
make it
to
through that
maintain.
horror. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's great to be solidly I mean, I feel lucky to have found a path that allows me to still make cool stuff, have a life of the mind, but to have enough comfort so that I'm not I mean, I've been through periods of my life where, you know, I I remember walking with a huge jar of change through the snow, of course, it's gotta be through the snow, with my, young child on my back so that I could make it to the bank because I didn't have a car and I was gonna bounce a check, a utility
Mm,
check. So, um, we all have those times in our lives and makes you appreciate when things get a little bit better
yeah,
and makes me want that for everyone because I think you make better art when you're not walking through the snow with a big jar of pennies trying to
in
not bounce a check. So,
indeed.
yeah.
Yeah, indeed, when you're not, living in scarcity, when you can
Yeah.
create space for something like art, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, yeah, I wish, everybody had that, had the privilege.
That's my hope is you know, to do whatever I can if if I have the means to so that's why my little personal campaign to support as many independent artists as I can. So, um Yeah, so hit me up and let me know about your music.
You heard it here.
I w
Tristra is open
I
for
know.
business.
I will try I will do my best to buy as much as I can and, yeah, support you, and I wanna hear about what everyone's up to, so.
Cool. Okay. That's actually a good segue into the next question, which is what is the first album you ever purchased and what is the most recent album that you purchased?
I think, my first album was probably I think it was Prince's 1999. Yeah, I'm old, I know. Um, but and that
Great
was, like,
record.
really and my parents didn't know about Prince, really. It was like, probably would have they probably would have been like, "Holy shit, what are you listening to?" And I was actually quite unnerved by some Prin like, I remember there was a B-side to something that was Erotic City, and I was just like, "What is going on here? I do not know these feelings. I'm, like, 8," you know? But it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Um, and the most recent album I bought, I think I bought a bunch of stuff from Bandcamp, but one album, this is the most recent album I've bought more than once because there's this amazing project that's got a 4AD connection, just bringing it all together. One of the guys from Clan of Zymox, one of the guys from His Name Is Alive, and then this amazing singer songwriter like guy from um, like rural Virginia, and it's called Meridian. It has kind of a funny name, but the album is called To Walk Behind the Sun,
Hmm.
and it is so amazing. Um, and it's got kind of like contemporary classical elements. It has this just strange vibe that's hard to describe, but it's very very cool. Sort of dark and rambly and strange. It's very inspiring for me. But anyway,
Cool. I love
that's the
that.
best that's yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna be checking that out for sure. Um, and you may have yeah, so this question I always ask, and you've mentioned a couple, who might qualify within this already. Feel free to use them again. But three artists of note that you heard for the first time in the past year ish.
Yeah, I'm just gonna peek at the Spotify here. That's like my only it's like my notepad, right? I
Yeah.
that's right. Um so I'm trying to think of what some good ones here. Some really fun ones. Oh, I stumbled on this group. They're kind of cheesy, but I love them. They're called Halos with a weird AE, whatever that's
Oh yeah.
called.
Oh yeah. I know that.
Um
I know that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really I love this band from Poland that's like one of those mystery bands like Salt called Boka, Bokka.
Cool.
They do like concept, like high concept albums, which I think is just like the coolest thing to do in this day and age. So they had one that's sort of I think about space travel. I don't know. It's called Blood Moon. That's a really good one. Um that I've discovered in the last year. Just kinda looking back at some of my other stuff. Uh, let's see here. Um, what other oh my gosh, it's just, like, a lot. Uh, I really this is funny. This is probably not new to everyone here, but I found this I just discovered the music of Rob Cluth, I think that's how you pronounce his name,
Oh,
who is a really interesting he's got this great album I think is out in 2020 2021 called Zero Point, and I think he's got some kind of like he's sort of got these mathematical bases, but it's really beautiful, very emotional stuff. So it's like kind of got some Aphex Twins type stuff going on, but also maybe a little bit of Max Richter, kind of
cool.
nice combo of this sort of romance and quirky calculation.
Cool. I love the sound of that too. Um, yeah, one of my favorite part in of this conversation series is that after each episode I have all this great music to go listen to.
Oh, awesome. Well, you're lucky. You're really lucky.
Yeah. Well, everybody can. That then we share it and make it available to everyone. So I'm
Oh,
not,
cool.
you know,
Awesome.
I'm not the only one who
I gotta
gets,
scroll back then and see what some
who
other
gets the
people have been
glitches.
listening to. Yeah.
Totally. It's all documented. And then here's the big question. You're going to to desert island and you get
Mhm.
to bring
Oh god,
three
no.
records with you, what are
You're
they?
so mean. Who are these mean people that, like, not only strand you on some shitty island, but are, like,
Yeah.
limiting your musical collection?
At least
So
they're giving
terrible.
you a bit of music to bring with you.
That's true. Mm, okay. Well, it depends on what the island is. It like a northern island or like sorry, I'm like stalling for time.
That's a good question.
Um,
Nobody's asked that before. Yeah, I
oh
mean, let's
god.
assume it's warm.
Okay. Well, because I was saying if it was colder, I'd probably want to bring like you want to bring something like some Ulver or like maybe some incredible string band or something. Um, for a warm island. It's this is so hard because there's just like I mean, I guess I if I'm gonna keep up the theme of me as like recovering goth, I'd probably have to take this Mortal Coil's Filigree and Shadow. That's a pretty good one.
Cool.
You probably gotta bring some like if you know if the person's like it has to be one like unit of music, maybe you bring like a big collection of like Bach chorales or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Um,
That's a good
or
idea.
or like Brian Eno's Apollo, like, you're
Mhm.
probably gonna wanna chill out on this island because 'cause you're all by yourself and you're, like, slowly dying.
Need
Um
some ambient music,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, and Apollo is probably, like, it's like that paradigmatic, I love that album so much, my kids love it, it's like a whole family thing. Um, let's see, what else? Like, you probably need something a little more rocking too, but, like, I don't know, like, it would have to this is I do so bad at these questions, like, I'm really terrible. Still stalling for time.
That's okay.
Um,
It's an impossible, horrible question, and that's
I
why
know, okay,
'cause
for
it's
some
like,
reason, I keep thinking of swans too, and I'm like, "That's just a
oh,
horrible thing to bring to a desert island." Like, I don't think you wanna listen to Children of God on repeat on this on this
but
island.
you would be the coolest person on that island if
Just
you
sitting
brought
there,
a Swans
just
record with you.
just sitting listening to Jarbo sing about, like, some sort of very, very weird romantic situation, I think, I don't know. Um, yeah, this is you're really mean, and I think I've named a couple, and I probably would you know what? I'm gonna be tricky. I
Okay.
would say I would ask someone to give me their favorite album that I've never heard. And this
Mm,
actually happened to me in life. I had a friend who burned me all these very mysterious CDs back when people did that, and I took them to Russia, and they just had random things written on them like fear.
mm.
Okay, like, what is this? And it ended up being, like, John Cale, right? Like, some of
Oh.
John Cale's, like, island era releases, and I had never heard them before, and I love them. And I had no idea what they were. I had to, like, get the metadata off my, like, laptop and just see what the titles were called and then try to figure out what they were, like, using my, 16-bit dial-up connection.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that I would have someone give me a mystery album.
I
Hopefully,
love
it
that
wouldn't be
answer.
like Milli Vanilli. But
Good.
even hey, if you listen to Milli Vanilli enough, you'd probably finally start getting the cosmic messages that are hidden deep in their album, right?
Indeed, indeed, and you'd have all the time and space to do that, so,
That's right, that's
at
right.
the right time.
I can write my next, 300-page treatise on the cosmic implications of Milli Vanilli, so
That's a great album name. Uh, cool. Well, that was a great answer. That was a great answer, and, I'm sorry, it was painful, but
I
it was
know, it was I feel better now that I'm on the other side.
yeah, everybody does. Um, and that's it, Tristra,
Awesome.
this has been really awesome, really great conversation, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your thoughts
Absolutely.
and your love of music. For those, who are listening who would like to, get involved in any way, read your novels, what's the best place for them to go check out your stuff?
Well, if you wanna see my professional side, you can look me up on LinkedIn because, like, I'm so cool that way. And I have a website for my creative projects, which include an upcoming podcast on an early American feminist, because like, don't we all by early, I mean, like, 1800s,
Wow,
and that is Newyear Media, all one word, .com. So,
cool.
yeah.
Cool. And then last but not least, now that you've been on For the Record, who is another music head that comes to mind that we should have on the series?
Have you guys talked to Mark Reddito?
Yes, he was an
I bet
early
you had.
guest.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, you know who you should talk to is my boss Dimitri. If you can get schedule some time with him, he is incredible and he's like got a really wild music background that included like activism in New York City and all sorts of cool stuff.
Cool. That would be awesome. I've been in touch with Dimitri before, so I would love to
Another oh,
have him on the
and if you
show.
want a lady, if you're looking for a lady, I
Sure.
just had a great interview with this amazing woman who's like a researcher on vinyl. Have you talked to Carolyn King?
No, I have not.
She's Scottish too, just like other people on this call. She's really cool and has a wonderful ethnographic perspective on vinyl listening, but she's also a really intriguing person and a music head, so she might be another great candidate.
I love that. I love that. I would love to chat, with Carolyn and have more Scottish people in my life.
You really can't have too many, I don't think.
Indeed.
I don't know. Well, maybe we should try and see what the
Yeah,
max is,
yeah,
but
yeah, indeed. Is there a limit? Um, cool. Well, thank you again, Tristra. This is really lovely. Thank you. I really appreciate, you taking the time to be
Sure,
here.
no problem.
Thanks everyone for being here. That's a wrap on another episode of For the Record, a conversation series with all manner of music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's a production of Grey Matter and a new Crate Coalition experiment in building connective listening graphs. We stamp every music mention you heard here, from musicians to venue owners to journalists to tech builders to DJs, and in the background, we're mapping these names to form those yet unseen connective threads between people. Want to get involved? You can check out our website at greymatter.fm or come hang out in the Crate Coalition Discord. See you next time.